that's what makes us human or makes us moms or caregivers. Like that is, I know there's all this butterfly rainbow language around like grief is love, but like truly I'm like the grieving is just as sacred as the loving. And it is, what else is more important than that taking up space, right? What else could be more important than you honoring your baby or missing them, yearning for them? I just can't think of anything else that could be more important than loving them and grieving them. To me, I'm like, what is more connecting in a village than like grieving together? And I think you see that a lot, obviously, in like with pregnancy loss or grieving a child who was only a few hours old, few days old, as though time somehow makes any difference in terms of like the love and how much that's disenfranchised. And I'm like, gosh, I think it's huge immediately. And so that grief, I'm like, it's not measured by the time that someone was alive.
Welcome to The Rainbow Connection. This podcast was designed for mothers who are finding their way through life after loss. Whether you're grieving, trying to conceive again, newly pregnant, or holding hope in your heart for what's to come, this space is for you. Each week you'll hear real and tender stories of love, heartbreak, healing, and the babies who continue to shape us. I'm your host, Kristin Mundy, a mother, doula, and a woman who's walked this path too. May these conversations remind you that you are not alone, that your baby is never forgotten, and that hope and grief can live here together. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to share about a very exciting, very needed new offering for a very specific season of motherhood. If you are parenting a living child or have recently welcomed your rainbow baby, and maybe you're realizing this chapter feels a little bit more layered than you expected, I created something with you in mind. It's called The Nest. The Nest is a supportive, ongoing community for mothers raising a living child after pregnancy or infant loss. It's a safe space where you don't have to explain why gratitude and grief still coexist here, where anxiety, identity shifts, relationship changes, and nervous system overwhelmed are spoken about honestly, not minimized. Because bringing your baby home doesn't erase what you've been through. It reshapes you for a second time. Inside the Nest, you'll find trauma-informed postpartum doula support, 2 virtual community calls each month, and a circle of women who truly understand parenting after loss. If that sounds like something your heart is needing, if you are looking for your village in your Earth Mama era, you can learn more at thedoulalife.ca/nest. And if you do decide to join us, use promo code NEST1 to get your first month free. I'd love to see you inside. Today on The Rainbow Connection, I get the privilege to sit down with Sara Rian, a poet, therapist, mother, and fellow griever, for a conversation that feels both deeply needed and rarely spoken out loud. Sara shares a story of losing her mother to suicide and how that loss shaped not only her grief, but the way she experiences love and connection and her own body even. Together, we open up a conversation around grief and intimacy, something so many women navigate and very quietly after loss, something that we all, I know, struggle with. Now, this episode is about the parts of grief that live beneath the surface, the ones that show up in our relationships, in our bodies, and in the way we try to find ourselves back to who we used to be. Now, if you've ever felt disconnected, overwhelmed, or unsure of how to hold both the grief and the love at the same time, this conversation is for you. Okay, enough from me. Let's hear from Sara. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Rainbow Connection. Today is going to be a really good episode. I can just feel it. It's a conversation so many of us need. You know, we talk so much about grief in this space, but we don't always talk about the other part of the equation, and that's our body, and about intimacy, and about sex. And yet there are so many of us women navigating loss or trying to conceive again or trying to stay connected to our partner or to our body. So many things that feel foreign. But today we are going to dive into all of that. Today, I'm sitting down with Sara Rian, who is a poet, a therapist, a mother, and a fellow griever. She is in good company today. Her work, I'm sure you've seen it online. If you are in the Lost Mom community, we are all sharing it because she has such an amazing gift with her poetry. It's one of my favorite things. But before, well, Sara, thank you for being here on the podcast. Let me just start there. Thank you for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you so much. It was such a beautiful introduction and everything. I'm not going to get like weepy or anything like already. I'm going to keep it together. Just thank you for having me on here. Your community is so beautiful and this is an honor. So I love
Yeah.
knowing that my words are even circulating through and with all the moms and everybody. It just means a lot.
It's like I feel that you speak like directly to our souls. I see like if one post resonates with one of us, all of us, like it's honestly like all of us are like, yes. And all of us end up sharing it because it's a space where I feel, grief in itself is so hard to find the right words, right? And you just have such a gift of being able to communicate so much of what so many of us are feeling. And it really is such a gift. But I have so many questions for you because, I see your work online and I'm like, I need to know this woman. I need to know her story. I need to know what brought her here. So why don't we start there, Sara, and give a little intro to our listeners about yourself and what kind of brought you to where you are today.
Yes, yes. I know so many people have probably heard this, and I'm like, I never get sick of telling it because I get to talk about obviously my mom and
Mm,
poetry and all of that. But so I'm like, as right now, obviously, I'm a therapist and all of that. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, all of these things, but many of those identities didn't exist at the time of my loss. So
mm,
I lost my mom in 2018 to suicide. I was 28 years old. She was 2 weeks shy of turning 56. She had been living with trauma and substance use and mostly trauma. It was all coming from just a lifetime of trauma. And so she had been battling depression and PTSD her entire life. And throughout all of that, she was just an amazing mom. So everything you see is usually me writing about her. I know a lot of people don't know who my loss is about. So I often am writing about the love between a mother and a child, which, I'm biased, but I think it's like the strongest. And obviously father, caregiver, all of that. There's just the bond between caregiver and child is like something unreal.
mhm,
So that is actually who inspires my poetry. So the grief, and I am usually speaking about death loss. Obviously, grief can be more than just death loss, but that is the one that I write about because that is the one that was the hardest thing for me. It's so permanent. Um, and it's not to downplay any other types of loss or grief, but there's just something about death loss, and we know the science behind it, but that was the most difficult. It's the most difficult for me to process.
mhm,
And obviously losing my mom, who was, my absolute best friend, and I didn't have children and I didn't have a partner, and she was like my person.
mhm.
So
Well,
that's
that's
who I write about.
one thing we talk about in this community all the time is just that bond between mother and child. It's just, yeah.
It's it's just unlike anything else, and I never wanna downplay sibling relationships or relationships with grandparents or things, but I'm like, there is my mom had talked about it so often, and, having become a parent, like, now I get it,
Mhm,
but that poetry is writing kind of from the other side, and I always tell, I have a lot of folks who have lost their children or had pregnancy loss, and I'm like, I will never try to take up, your platform or try to, like, use my voice to kind of go over yours because my loss is so different. But I will say, like, there's no like your child loves you, and I'm writing as an adult who truly like loves her mom. And so like to never doubt that I think I felt that since the minute I was born, right? And even before, and my mom would talk about that connection even in utero. So I'm like, just these are love poems to all the moms because that's who I'm writing to. Um And so that's when my poetry journey started as well, was, I wrote a little bit, but I did not write about grief and loss, and then when she died, I began writing right away, within days. It was the only thing I could really do to process. I was pretty, like, I was not functioning very well, and
Mhm.
that was, it saved me. So short poems, reading it, writing it truly saved me, and, here we are almost 8 years later, and I still lean on it the most. It is the one thing that I lean on the most when it comes to grief, when it comes to connecting to my mom, tapping into that bond, poetry. It was not a phase. I thought it was gonna be a phase, and it was not. I still sit here writing it, so
Well, we love it.
yeah. Thank you, thank
We
you.
don't love it, it's like that
We
thing where
don't
it's
want
like, I wish we didn't
Yeah.
love it, but like I said before, you really have a way with words of helping those of us who, might struggle finding the right words or, kind of pinpointing what we're actually feeling and seeing that and witnessing that in the words that you are writing. It's just so powerful. I know, like, personally, I never was a writer. I actually, like, hated English class growing up, like,
Yeah.
essays and stuff. It would be like, ugh, horrible, but when we lost our daughter 5 years ago, that was, like, my first thing that I went to too, because it was like it was the only thing that I could really articulate and, like, make sense of actually what I was feeling, and honestly, that's what even brought me to my platform today. It's probably what brought me to this podcast was just, like, being able to, like, put the words on paper, right? And that being a huge part of processing. Now, were you a writer ever before, or did this all come from when you lost your mother?
Yeah, really, it was just I dabbled in some. That was, the height, that was the peak of Insta poetry, right? That was
Mm,
when Milk and Honey came out, right? So 2017, 2018 was when that was all happening, so I was dabbling in just very similar style, like, short poems, but it was never about death loss. It was, I was writing about feminism, and, I was a therapist then too, so it was during, after the Me Too movement and the
mm,
election, so some of my stuff was political, some of it was about dating. It was a big snapshot of where I was at that time as a
mhm,
trauma therapist. And um, so it was not often, but I would create some poems and I would share them with my mom because she loved poetry and she loved that I wrote. So I would share them with her. And then I created my Instagram page and had like 10 followers and would put them there because people started getting concerned because my stuff was like kind of intense.
mhm.
It was sad or it was dark, or right? So people were like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, I'll just create this page and I'll share it under Sara Rian. Ryan's my
Mm,
middle name." So I was like, "Here, this way, my bad poetry because I didn't think it was good. I was like, I'll put all this like weird, sad, intense poetry on this page." So I didn't have much before she passed away. That was only like a few months before.
mm.
So really, my writing career has been just writing about her, writing about the grief, writing about loss. Yeah.
Isn't it so interesting that when you're being honest, people are like, "Are you okay?" And you're like, "Well,
Yes.
this is what's making me okay." Like, it's just pretty funny
Yeah.
because I remember even when I started writing, people were like, "I'm really concerned about Kristen." You're like, "Well, you probably should be because I'm going through, like, insurmountable grief, right?"
Yes.
Now, Sarah, like, as a therapist, with your background as a therapist and now being a poet, like, what can you say about the power of writing, even just using that as a tool to, like, process grief? Like, what can you tell us about that?
It's so good for us. Like, it's so good, and I wish I could cite studies right now, and I wish I could totally nerd out, and I can't. I'm just like, my brain is not in that mode exactly, but I do know, and I say that with confidence, it is so good for us,
Hmm.
whether it be poetry or letter writing to yourself, to someone who's passed, writing, just journaling. We know that it connects something, it connects our like a form of narrative therapy, right?
Hmm.
There's science that backs up that this moves things through our body. It connects mind and body. It connects different hemispheres in your brain. It lets your body process, even just writing back and forth. If you hand write, that's like bilateral stimulation. You see this, right, in tapping exercises and EMDR. So it really is a therapeutic tool even without looking at the content, even just journaling about how am I feeling right now, or what do I feel in my body, but to really write about grief, loss, about the person that has died, about your love. It is such an amazing tool. It's a different kind of expression. It goes beyond um, data, or it goes beyond the textbook language, right? It's like working a different part of your brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it can move things that maybe some other traditional forms just can't move. Whether it be your own processing, or even again just kind of tapping into your body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's different than just talking about it. It's different when you're looking for a metaphor, or you're using kind of like creative language, right? Or if you're sitting there journaling and you're scanning your body and you're talking about how you feel that day or what you miss about the person. It really is amazing. And I think when I was writing, I knew all this. Like there's kind of like that separate, like the therapist in me knew writing was good,
Mm-hmm.
but I was doing it, and it wasn't like I was being told to do it for therapy, right? No one was saying like you should write. It was just happening. And then
Mm-hmm.
now obviously I know, like I can connect, like, oh yeah, you were totally like therapizing yourself. You were totally doing something that was healing, without like really calling it that.
Mm-hmm. I think one big part too that I would think would be a part of that equation is like you also just like aren't opening up yourself to other people's like discomfort, right? You could say whatever you want, process whatever you want. You don't have to have someone hold the space. You're like kind of holding that space for yourself, right? It becomes like this
Absolutely.
safe little haven where you can write whatever you want without people projecting their discomfort on you. And
Yes.
it's free. Like that's one thing that I'm always like, I try to really like suggest free forms of taking care of yourself just because like not everyone can afford a
Absolutely.
therapist, right? Um, speaking of discomfort, making other people
Yeah.
suffer, I feel like this is a really important one. I know one of the big things that you like to talk about or believe in, which, I'm sure so many of us do, grief deserving space, right? And having that space or making that space in writing. I know so many women listening, are grieving babies. And the world didn't maybe know them in the same way that we did, right? What would you say to a woman who feels like her grief is too much?
Mm.
Too much to take up space, or too much space to take up?
Gosh, I feel like that's the whole point of it all, right? Is to take up space. That's what makes us human, or makes us moms or caregivers. Like that is, I know there's all this butterfly rainbow language around like grief is love, but like truly I'm like the grieving is just as sacred as the loving.
Mhm.
And it is, what else is more important than that taking up space, right? What else could be more important than you honoring your baby, or missing them,
Mhm.
yearning for them? I just can't think of anything else that could be more important than
Mhm.
loving them and grieving them,
Mhm.
right? So it would be that, just like who made that, who discredited this, who put this on the back burner? And that's society and culture and all these things, and especially for lost parents and lost moms, that somehow it's shameful to talk about, that I mean, it makes people uncomfortable. Like that was not innate. We were not born like that. That was created, right?
Mhm.
That's been man-made. Um, there's to me, I'm like, what is more connecting in a village than like grieving together,
Totally.
right?
Mhm.
And so that, and I think you see that a lot, obviously, in like with pregnancy loss, or grieving a child who was only a few hours old, few days old, as though time somehow makes any difference in terms of like the love and how much that's disenfranchised. And I'm like, gosh, I think it's huge immediately, right?
Mhm.
And so that grief, I'm like, it's just not, it's not measured by the time that someone was alive,
Mhm.
right?
It's about
So I
everything
don't
that comes
know.
after, right? Like
Yeah,
you're still losing the same future, right? The same
absolutely.
vision you might have had for yourself or, you know, version of yourself even, right?
Absolutely, and I'm like, if anything, I'm like, and I don't compare, I don't create hierarchies and everything, but that's almost more heartbreaking that there's more future left where they aren't there to create the memories and hit milestones and everything, right? Like I always say, I'm very privileged to have had my mother for 28 years. Yes, of course, I would have loved to have had her longer. I do think that was a little young, and I don't think that's how it was supposed to go. But I had 28 years to create memories and fill like my tank, right? So it's interesting. It just feels like there's no winning. You either had someone a long time and your grief shouldn't take up enough space, or you had someone so little that what's there to grieve, and I'm doing air quotes, right?
Mhm.
And it just kind of, if that doesn't show you that we are so grief illiterate, I don't know what does, because the fact that like you just don't win means like we are not set up to support and understand grief.
And it's not like a competition, right? That's the other part of the piece. And like, I love the quote by David Kessler saying, like, your grief is as individual as your fingerprint, right?
Absolutely.
Everyone's grief, their 10 out of 10 might be different than your 10 out of 10. All of it is completely, valid, right? Now, what would you say? Trying to think of where we can go next with this one. But how, is there a difference? Because I know that some of our grief, because it is maybe seen as like like an uncomfortable thing or maybe possibly taboo. Is there much of a difference between private grief and hidden grief, like grief that you want to keep to yourself? I do know that like writing especially, and we mentioned this before, it does keep it nice and private because maybe there are parts that you don't want to be witnessed. But what could you say about, you know, wanting to keep some things to yourself and then wanting to be witnessed and what, would be supportive of either one of those?
Yeah, oh my gosh, it all, like, comes down to even, like, having the choice, right?
Mhm.
There's a difference between choosing to keep your grief or your stories or your memories or your feelings private versus it not being allowed or it being shamed,
Mhm.
and I think having that choice is really healing, and I don't mean healing as in making the grief go away or the pain go away, but I mean healing even to a nervous system that just had such loss of control in
Mhm.
someone that they adored so much taken from them to have a choice whether to share it or not. No one is entitled to your grief or your story, but you should always have a choice to share it without it being shamed, without it being quieted or silenced or judged. That part of like having the agency or the choice or the space to choose to share, that's the difference, right? There's nothing wrong with private, right? There's nothing wrong with keeping things to yourself as long as you know that's your choice and you're not being forced to keep things private. Because it is also very healing for some folks to share. Because when you share, it gives someone an opportunity to connect and say, me too. And there is that human relationship part that we need so much, not just to like attachment is so much more than just attaching to like survive and have like healthy relationships. It's like, it's survival, but to grieve support and community is one of the most important pieces of being able to properly grieve. So if you don't feel like you have a choice to share or a choice to find community, that's a major issue,
Mhm.
right? But it is not required to share in public spaces or share everything is not required to move trauma or move grief through your body or move into a space of integration. But you should have the choice, and we are not, you know, obviously podcasts and communities like this are getting us there, but
Mhm.
we have a lot of work to do to let people know they have that choice.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's one reason why I'm hoping this podcast exists, that we can, somewhat move that needle into being able to witness people more in their grief and being able to make more safe spaces for those who need that safe space, right? I always like that, quote too, that, our shame dies when our story is told in safe places, because one of the big reasons why our shame does die is because someone goes. Me too, right? You aren't alone in the feelings that you're feeling and the pain that you're experiencing. Like, you're normal. And like, I see you and I can totally relate, right? Speaking about relationships, this was one of the things that, I really wanted to dive into because I do know that you often talk about grief and sex. And like, that's
Mhm.
one huge part of the equation
Yes.
post loss for some of us, anyways. Maybe not all of us, but I know in my community, a community that is centered around pregnancy loss and trying to conceive and being pregnant after loss or even being postpartum after loss, sex and intimacy in our bodies can be a really complicated thing. Relationships can be a really complicated thing. And when I say relationships, I mean our relationship with our partner or
Yes.
now grief does, I know, live in our bodies. Like we
Mhm.
do, what do we do when it lives in our bodies and we somehow have to re-enter it? I polled my audience. I have a whole list of questions here because there's a
Oh,
lot of women that are really needing to have this conversation.
yes.
But like I said, we don't talk about sex in pregnancy after loss or trying to conceive after loss. So it becomes loaded, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and when we don't talk about it, that fear and that pressure and all that stuff starts to build. So I know that one of the big themes is like avoidance or having fear around being intimate or having sex in grief.
Yes.
What's happening with that? Why are
Mm,
women feeling so scared or avoiding it so much?
yes. Well, I think that's happening even without the loss part,
Hmm.
right? So oftentimes, because that's what's really loaded about sex and grief is sex alone is so loaded, especially for women, where bodies are kind of like immobilizing and freezing and fawning, not because of some major traumatic event, which does also happen. It's not, my background is sexual trauma, but a lot of times it wasn't like one event the way we hear about in combat or other forms of trauma. Losing a baby, a pregnancy, a child, like, that is traumatic,
Hmm.
right? So we're not even just talking about grief, we're talking about traumatic grief and traumatic loss. So that's over here. When we talk about sex in general, women are struggling to feel in their bodies because just society and growing up and, like, women are taught to not do that. Right? We don't have one big event. We have 1,000 little events
Like
that tell
micro
you
events.
to get out of your body,
Hmm.
be out of your body. You need to perform. You need to manage. You need to keep an eye on things, right? So you're already dealing with folks who probably have already had embodiment like disruption throughout their entire life. And now they're here,
Hmm.
right? And they've experienced the worst loss or losses, and their body can feel like it has betrayed them
Hmm.
or they could even feel resentful towards their partner, right? And all of these things, and now it's compounding, and that's so heavy,
Hmm.
right? Because people are already struggling to feel in their body. So you have the nervous system, right? With trauma and grief, all these things going on with your nervous system that can cause fawning, avoidance, right? Avoidance of something that's painful. Um, and I do want to say, just in case anyone's listening, it can go the other way too.
Hmm.
Some people, their desire skyrockets after loss, and that brings its own level of shame because why would I be thinking about sex or wanting sex when I just lost my baby?
Hmm.
And how selfish of me, which it's also just like a nervous system response. It wants connection,
Hmm.
it wants soothing, and sex is a way to do that. But what we often see are folks struggling with the avoidance. I'm shut down. I don't have desire. Well, yeah, your body probably didn't want to eat,
Hmm.
it probably didn't want to drink anything. It probably struggled to sleep. And those are actual drives that we die without. So what do you think's going to happen with sex, which is
Hmm.
not needed, right, to survive as
It's
much
low
as,
on the total pole,
yeah,
right?
even though people really want to seem like we'll die without it, it's a drive. It's not a drive. It's not a drive. We don't die without it, right? It is a tool for intimacy and connection. And that shuts down for a lot of people because it does involve so much of your body. And if you are out of your body, if you are not trusting your body, if you feel betrayed by your body, or even there's no cognitive processing happening about it, you just aren't in your body because it went through something so terrible, right? how in the world do we do this thing that like directly involves our bodies?
Mhm.
And sex does involve, it's the same nervous system that just experienced that loss. It's the same nervous system that attended the funeral. It's the same nervous system that did all of these really hard, tragic things, is the same one that's controlling desire and arousal. It's the same one that has to feel safe to feel aroused, to feel desire. It's the same one that has to feel safe to feel these things, to orgasm, right? When all of that's shut down, what is your motivation?
Yeah, there is so
Right?
much to like unpack here.
There's
Like
so much.
grief is inherently, I always say grief is inherently like a very unsexy thing. Like for me personally, like I'm not thinking of when my heart is broken and like I'm not eating or drinking or sleeping. Sex is very low on the totem pole. Like how am I supposed to be able to do that? Okay, you said so much amazing things that I want to dig into here a little bit more specifically. So I know you brought up dysregulation. So grief. Let's talk about grief and dysregulation. Like how does grief, for one, dysregulate, especially if someone, maybe that term is a new term to them. Like what, can you explain that to me? Like how grief makes you have a dysregulated nervous system?
Yes. Oh my gosh, there's like, and I do not research this, obviously. I'm pulling this from multiple researchers, but you can, you'll hear about like the grieving brain and the grieving body, wonderful books and all of this. We know with grief, it is both a separation anxiety, right? So you have like this separation part
Hmm.
on top of the possible traumas, right? Like losing the person as a physical being, on top of the traumas of how it went about and how tragic and how violent and how sudden and all of
Hmm.
these other pieces that relate, right? So you'll hear people talk like grief is a learning process. It's not a bad thing, right? Grief is normal. It's there. It's your body trying to form new pathways. It takes a long time, right? Your body's trying to form new pathways that create a life where this person is not physically here and that their hopes and dreams are not going to happen, right? And your nervous system is slowly responding to both old and new maps, right? The whole time. Obviously, early on, and I don't mean in a few days, I'm talking even like the first years, your body is still getting hit with an old map where someone should be there, or they were in my belly, or that, I'm seeing they should be in this nursery, or all these things, or they should be starting school, and it's hitting
Hmm.
this old map and it's responding, right, with heartache and or you could be shutting down, right? It could make you anxious. You could have so many different like body responses. So yeah, it's this grief itself is not bad, but I think when you add the trauma,
Hmm.
right, and especially I think the loss we're talking about now, I have not met a mom who has lost their child, baby, a pregnancy, and not been traumatized in some way,
Hmm.
right? Because that's an abnormal event.
Hmm.
And the way their bodies respond is normal, but the event was not
Hmm. Mothers aren't
normal.
supposed to lose their
You're
babies.
not,
Yeah.
right? You're not. So you add that in, and yeah, so we have like all of these pieces happening. There's the neuroscience, but I mean, it's hitting you at every level. It's hitting you at a spiritual level, an emotional level, a mental level, right? You are actually like recoding in your brain, and your nervous system is like trying to say like, okay, we're safe. When originally it was just trying to like get you back to them, right? It's panicking. It is searching for them. And then it shifts from like this protest to this despair, which is like, oh, they're not coming back. I have lost them, right? I think from there, the idea is that there's the continuing bonds, and this is you finding ways to, have rituals with them. This is a way to bring hope and joy back into your life. Like that happens after the despair for so long. But when we talk about sex, a lot of folks are like, if I'm in despair stage,
Hmm.
right? Why would I want to do this thing that brings joy or closeness or any pleasure, right? When I'm very much am either protesting their loss or their absence and I'm still like searching for them, or I'm absolutely in despair and I'm bitter, right? Or I'm shut down. And that's often where folks end up coming to a sex therapist like me, or looking somewhere for support.
Hmm. Yeah, that brings me so beautifully into like, when I polled the audience, one huge, you know, topic or similarity in a lot of questions was this disconnection from our body. So I know, like, obviously having a regulated nervous system helps us stay a little bit more connected to our bodies. But with, the complexities of losing your baby and it having directly to do with your body, and maybe you don't trust your body and maybe you are dysregulated, you know, how does that kind of grief disconnect us from like sensuality, I guess? Like, how
Yeah.
does trauma actually imprint on that? How can I even put this? It feels so complex because, it really is a part of our body, losing our baby, losing a pregnancy, and then having to like come back in your body. I guess my question is like, how do we do that?
Oh, yeah, right. Like the big question really is
How? Yeah.
how, right? And I'd love to pretend to be some like wellness coach or whatever who says like you just do these things, right? You just do some yoga, you just like,
Mhm.
or here I have this like simple solution. It's so unique. And again, we're already probably working already with dysregulation around sex that started long before the loss of your baby,
Mhm. I mean, I
right?
would love to tap into that too.
Yeah, like that probably existed before. So now again, here we're talking about this compounding part of like, what does this grief do? How do we get back in our bodies? And it's, well, your body went through trauma and it went through something so painful that to probably keep you safe, it left your body and
Mhm.
continues to leave your body. And I don't want to push the narrative that like you are just doing things wrong or that you need to do something different and that'll cause regulation. Like it's also like your community.
Mhm.
It's also the world around you and how they talk about loss and how they talk about pregnancy loss and child loss and how they're treating you, all these things that create safety. It is not just about grounding techniques and embodiment practices. It's also a safe community, a
Mhm.
safe partner, right? High levels of communication on top of embodiment practices such as grounding or body scans or movement. Like those are wonderful. Those
Yeah,
are
like
great things,
if you're constantly coming back in your body and you're just constantly being bombarded by things making you go leave your body, it would be really hard,
Yes.
right?
Right. Why would we your body's doing it to be safe. It's created, right? It takes this shape to keep you safe, to tell it it's wrong and to constantly bring it back into this place and it not yet be safe. Like this is that like what is actually a sense of safety, right? So it's so much more than just like only bringing people back into their bodies. It's just like where in your body is safe, right? What do you think about your body, right? Do you blame your body? How do we have a relationship with our bodies without judgment? Because that's often there with pregnancy loss and probably there with body image and all the things that started in childhood, right? So embodiment practices are they're so wonderful, getting people in their bodies, that stuff that talk therapy can't quite do that. But the community support part, the surrounding yourself with people who talk properly about grief and surrounding yourself with grief literacy, um, trauma informed grief literacy, I think is crucial. Communicating with a partner. So it's not just about doing sex or doing sensuality or it's talking about it. That actually leads to higher sexual satisfaction than the actual doing, right? Talking about what you miss and what has changed and talking about what that means for you. Like by us not having sex, it means I miss you. I miss your skin. I miss the closeness. I miss all these things. Is there any other ways we can connect, right? We don't need to be ashamed that this has changed for us or if it hasn't. There's no right or wrong or way your body responds, but it is not just on you to cultivate sensuality or sexuality again. It is also on your community, your village, and the person you are engaging in sex with, right? So if you are partnered, they have to be involved in helping you feel safe, secure, have choice, right? Because if we increase that pressure, when people know their desire drops and that sex has come down and frequency comes down and they are worried like a partner is going to leave them or whatever, like that doesn't stress is going to just make this worse, right?
Mhm.
So communicating, don't not making this all about you and trying to force yourself back into your body, but really enhancing safety and connection through talking about it with a partner.
While we take a quick break, I'd love to tell you all about Mother Like No Other, my community for mothers who are navigating life after pregnancy or infant loss. Whether you're actively trying to conceive, navigating next steps, unsure what to do next, or wondering who the heck you even are anymore, this space was created for you. Because life after loss isn't linear, and deciding what comes next isn't so simple, and figuring out who you are in the aftermath can feel incredibly isolating. Inside Mother Like No Other, we gather for 2 live community calls each month where we talk about the real stuff, navigating decisions, rebuilding trust in our bodies, managing fear and waiting, next steps. There's also an ongoing private community chat where you can show up in real time and growing resource library created specifically for this season. This is not surface level encouragement. It's honest, trauma-informed support from women who truly get it, and a doula who has walked this path too. And the best part, it's only $22 a month. No long-term commitment, just support when you need it most. If that sounds like something your heart has been craving, if you have been looking for your village, you can learn more at thedoulalife.ca/mother. I'd love to see you inside. So I have like a twofold question to follow up that with. Now, how would you suggest like opening up that conversation with your partner? I feel like as a woman, and this probably goes back to that other, what we've been taught way before our loss, but as a woman and the person who went through the loss physically, right? How do we broach this conversation with our partner, knowing that maybe they feel differently about their body and maybe they're more open to having sex? Like, how do we make that sense of safety and connection with our partner, but then also with that? Well, let's answer that first, and then I'll do
Okay.
my follow-up question.
Yes. So I know it does take bravery, because I'm guessing that
Mhm.
even before the loss and everything, like a lot of couples are not talking about it. They're
Mhm.
doing it. They're doing the things they think they're supposed to, right? They have this like routine or a script around it, but they most likely have not like come to the drawing table and said like, let's talk about sex. How are we feeling about it?
Mhm.
What do we want to change anything? How are we
Mhm.
feeling about frequency? How's your desire been? What affects your desire? No one's like doing that. So when I work, because I'm marriage and family therapist as well as a certified sex therapist. So when I was working with couples more often, I would actually tell them like to do a weekly check-in, a couples check-in. And that was not just how do we feel about sex? It was several other questions of like, how are you feeling this week? What are you carrying? How did I make you feel loved this week? Did you get enough alone time this week? Is there anything that's really you're stressing out about that you're carrying that's good for me to know? And what this does is it builds intimacy, which is closeness. Sex is a tool for intimacy, right? We can find other tools. If sex is kind of offline right now, and we're just trying to even get back in touch with our bodies, we can still connect with our partner through other tools. So a couples check-in is great. In that check-in, I will often put a question of like, how are we feeling about sex? That doesn't mean do you want it more or do you
Mhm.
want it less, but just like what things have been coming up? Have you noticed like, gosh, I'm not thinking about it, but I miss this. I'm not thinking about it, but I'm worried you are. And notice what that can open up. So sometimes scheduling a weekly couples check-in with a set of structured questions, which you can find online and all kinds of stuff. Sometimes just having that scheduled with your partner takes the heat off like who initiates, because it's scheduled time
Mhm.
to talk about it and talk about what's happening for you. You're more than just like sex, right?
Mhm.
We don't want this to be some like transactional thing of like, we're here to file complaints about it not happening more or
Mhm.
not, like that, but to talk for your partner to say, gosh, I miss you, right? It's
Mhm.
not about sex. It's not about my orgasm. It's not about getting off, which I think is a problem in the sexual wellness world in the US already. But like, gosh, I miss you. Is there other ways we can connect this week, right? While your body, while you work on safety practices, how can we make your body feel secure and safe and loved and not judged and not like a vessel and not like something that's just broken, right? Which
Mhm.
happens so often. right?
Well,
So
then,
that is one way to kind of get the subject rolling more than once and really make it a part of the conversation.
okay. Now, this opens up two other like elements before my follow-up question. But I feel like we're already, if we're in a heterosexual relationship, we're already almost at a disadvantage, like broaching this conversation off the bat, just because many of us are going through postpartum, right? So it's not only just the grief aspect to this, but it's actually like the hormonal, physical aspect to this too, right?
Yes. I mean,
And
you're grieving a hormonal balance. You are
um,
grieving more.
mhm,
These are the parts, the more ambiguous losses or secondary losses, right? The things that aren't as tangible, but
mhm,
very much still grief, right? You
mhm,
probably are grieving a body that felt more balanced,
mhm.
right? And felt, like you had a wider window of tolerance to things.
Yeah, or even
Yeah.
like some semblance of a libido, right? That part
Yeah.
of
Oh
that
my
too.
gosh.
And then I
Yeah.
think you also add in grief because, like, obviously, as a partnership in a pregnancy loss or a child loss, you're both also grieving. Whereas, like,
Grieving.
maybe in some other situations, maybe only one of you would be grieving. But in this situation, you are both grieving and you're probably, I mean, grief is as individual as our fingertips, could also be grieving very differently. So there already is like this huge difference, right?
Yes. The
Yeah.
chances of you grieving the exact same way as your partner is like slim to none.
Hmm.
Right? And same way, handling a stressor, right? Someone loses a job or something happens, very much not the same as losing a child. But
Hmm.
even that, to see how different two people respond, yet no one is talking about sex, right? They'll say how different you were. One person's quiet about it, one person's not. One person's, yeah, one person might be more like internal processing versus open. One might be angry, one might be not. But no one's talking about like, well, what happened to your sexual desire?
Hmm.
'Cause one might skyrocket and the other
Totally.
might be non-existent, and that's actually like, that can happen with any gender,
Hmm. And then what
right?
happens, right? Because it's like if we're
A
starting
desire
off,
discrepancy,
yeah, and
right?
then people getting, feeling rejected or people, everyone misinterpreting things. I think like the weekly check in, I really love that concept because I think that not only just with the sex component, but I think that would help with a lot of different things. Like, even if you are grieving differently, even if you like haven't even broached the conversation of our sexual desire is very different right now. And like, what does that look like between us? Um, my follow up question, because I know a lot of women are like, okay, this is sounding really hard.
Yeah,
All of these
to be fair,
factors,
it is, yes.
it's tough.
Yes.
What would you suggest, or what insight can you give us for the woman who is listening to this, who is grieving? Maybe, her libido is struggling. Maybe she's dealing with a whole lot of these factors, but she wants to get pregnant again.
Mhm.
So she not only like doesn't feel safe, but she somehow has to do the thing that doesn't feel safe to get the outcome that she wants. What would you
This
say
is
to that woman?
this one is I think this is I don't wanna say tricky, but think of how complicated that feels, right? We are
So
trying to tell
complicated.
our bodies that it has a choice, and it needs to feel that choice at all times to say, "I wanna move forward with sex or I don't. I wanna move forward with this or I don't." And I don't mean just sex as intercourse, but move forward with kissing and practicing pausing and not. But when it comes to if you are trying to conceive through sex, there is a part where women will say, like, "I need to force myself through this to get this particular outcome," and it's difficult because they're misaligned goals.
Mhm.
You probably are feeling like, "I have 2 different goals. I wanna feel safe in my body, and I wanna feel sexual desire go up, and I don't want to hurt my nervous system. I don't wanna coerce myself into doing something because that is really hard, right?
Mhm.
You're kind of teaching your body to leave itself. If I'm
Mhm.
doing something I don't wanna do, it's going to safely exit, right? And I might dissociate, I might whatever, but here I am saying I have a timeline and I need to have intercourse, right? And that is it's tough. That is a very tough place to be in. I often say like that is a prime time to be working with a therapist who does embodiment practices, if you have access, of course. But this is a major time to do that embodiment work and that grounding and that being in your body safely and feeling what choices. And sometimes there are reasons people have sex and it is not always pleasure, but we still need there to be safety.
Hmm.
Right. There's still your goal may not be to orgasm. It may not even be completely like for closeness for your partner at that point. It might be to conceive, but is there a way we can do that safely,
Hmm.
right? And have your body feel safe. And that's, I think, the trickier part, because we want to think it. Well, say, of course I'm safe. I'm going to get a baby,
Hmm.
right? And I want a baby and I can think myself out of it, but really that nervous system, that body stuff is going to be like, really, do you feel a sense of safety?
Hmm. So much deeper,
Right.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes people connect with their bodies and their body's like, I'm not ready for that.
Hmm.
And sometimes they're like, I am. Like, I can do this and it's not disruptive, right? And it's okay if I'm not trying to orgasm or this isn't for pleasure, but I can still feel close.
Hmm.
This is still really a beautiful moment for my partner and I, because we might be conceiving our child.
Hmm.
Right. And like we're still a team. And I think communication with that, right? We don't want our bodies to become so medical
Hmm.
or vessels or like these things, right? These things that can break or not. We want to be like a partner to our partner if we are having, if it is like partnered, trying to conceive. I know that's not everybody's trying to conceive while partnered, but that communication around it and how else can we make this a sensual, close thing, even if it's not about like an orgasm,
Well, you
right?
bring up a really good point because I feel, and this is probably what you were talking about before, sex has been painted to the majority of us, I'm sure, as like a finish line. Like it's about
Yes.
pleasure, it's about finishing, it's about getting off. And I really like the idea of it being about love and like maybe calling in our baby, but we're also kind of battling that messaging that it's about that too. And I feel like that messaging, the pleasure messaging, is like one of the things that makes it feel inherently unsafe, right? Because like
Mm,
maybe I don't want to orgasm. Maybe the thought of orgasming is like, I don't think that I could. Like, I don't think
yes.
I would really even be able to. So I'm just going to shut down any intimacy with my partner altogether because the ultimate goal won't be possible. But then you're missing out this whole other piece of it, right?
Absolutely. Having goals with sex already is like part of the problem. And that's where it's so difficult with trying to conceive, right? And calling your baby in is like, oh, we do kind of have a goal here.
Hmm.
Can it have other goals along the way, right? Or can we be present and can this be sensual and can this be close? Um, you know, Along with that, I think that's kind of what you're building and that's what you're kind of trying to co-create with your partner. But when it is the finish line is an orgasm, and particularly like if you're in a heterosexual partnership, like a male orgasm, which
Hmm.
again is often needed for conceiving, we're kind of doing both. We're trying to unlearn
Hmm.
all of this stuff for women around like there's no finish line and it's not about orgasm and it's okay if your male partner doesn't orgasm. And yet we're like, well, kind of does though if we're trying to, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
But knowing that, are we talking about that? It changes everything. It can that exist? Can we have sex that doesn't include you trying to orgasm and it still be okay?
or
Right?
even
Can
for the
we
woman, like being performative, right? Like, I don't have it in me to.
absolutely. We don't want performance.
No,
Performance
yeah,
isn't presence,
yeah,
right? And your partner may also be feeling these things, right? When we don't talk about it, we just think, oh, this is so great for the partner. I'm like, it's not. This actually absolutely can feel like a performance. They can also feel medical, right? What if they want to engage in moments, other types of sexual play that don't result in them having to orgasm? Can we add that in? Can we have kissing? Can we have close touch? Can we have deep cuddling? Can we have other types of play so the nervous system understands that sex is not only intercourse ending in a male orgasm, right? Adding things in can be corrective and healing too.
sure. Now, mind, let's talk about like the other side of the coin, right? And the people that, are wanting that closeness, that are wanting that, maybe their sex drive has gone up. And like, I remember, after I lost my daughter, I had a friend who lost their baby around the same time, and her and I responded so very differently. Like, she was wanting to have sex with her husband every day. And I was like, I cannot relate to that in any sense of the meaning at all. But I remember her struggling a lot with that guilt that she like wanted pleasure. So what could you say, to the women who do feel guilty, or the men that might be listening to this? My audience is primarily women, but what would you say to those people who are feeling guilty for enjoying sex after losing their baby or needing sex?
Yes. So either you could have already had like your desire level was that before and having
Mhm.
the guilt around it being unchanged, which is just, hey, your baseline is your baseline and your body, like it didn't hit that part of you, right?
Mhm.
It maybe affected so many other areas, but grief and loss does not mean it's going to hit every single realm of someone. Some stuff might go unchanged. So if your desire level did not go up or down, and it's just
Mhm.
like, I still want to do this every day, it's like, okay, hey, that just means the body might not have hit, right? Like the grief did not didn't mess with this part of you, and that's you're just at your baseline.
Mhm.
If it did go up, it makes a lot of sense why, because the body is going to crave closeness. It's going to want that oxytocin. It's going to want the dopamine, right? There's these hormones and neurotransmitters, and the body knows that touch gets that.
Mhm.
Right? It's the same, right? That bonding chemical that's when you're nursing or you're holding your baby. Skin to skin is not just mother and child or father and child, that's partners,
Mhm.
right? So we get skin hungry. So if your body's doing that, it's smart and it knows what to do. And it's
Mhm.
saying, I really crave closeness, and this is like a highway to that. Like we can have sex or we can touch, or it can be very sensual. And I'm going to be able to have access to all these hormones. And I really need that right now because I feel terrible,
Mhm.
right? Now, I always say keep an eye. Anything can be sometimes too much of a good thing. Hey, if it feels like you are in total avoidance, if it feels like you are escaping life, like you can't do anything else, if it's keeping you from eating, right? Like obviously talk to somebody,
Mhm.
and like that makes sense. Your body could be going into a full escape mode, right? It could be in avoidance mode, maybe, right? But a lot of time desire can go up in a
Mhm.
very safe way. And as long as you're talking to your partner about it, right? If there's still a desire discrepancy and now your desire's up and theirs might be low, all the more reason we need to be talking about it. Hey, I miss this. I think I'm skin hungry. I'm craving this. My body just wants closeness. Okay, we need to be talking about that,
Mhm.
right? But you're not broken. And it can feel very shaming and like guilt inducing because um, we're talking about death here, right? We're talking about loss. So many things died. So
Mhm.
many things died, right? Not just a body. It was your child, and hopes and trust and all these things with your body have died, in a sense of safety, in a sense of control, all died.
Mhm.
And now we're supposed to do this thing that's an absolute celebration of life and total aliveness, right? Being present in sex is aliveness.
Mhm.
And some people feel really guilty for engaging in that, the same way you might feel guilty when you laugh again, or when you go and say, wow, that was a really good meal, and you enjoy a big meal, or when you go on vacation again and you're smiling. And we
Mhm.
judge ourselves so badly because we found moments of joy. That's the same thing with sex, right? You're trying to
Mhm.
kind of like throw a rule book at your body as though it's not allowed to feel these things again, which that's actually, I think, our way of surviving is integrating those pieces of aliveness back in at a time when everything feels like it's about death.
Mhm. Mhm. It's hard to choose life, right? It's hard to
Yes.
live again, right? Or just figure out how do exactly do we do that, right? Now, I know that we talked a lot about safety, and we talked a lot about how we can like, find some semblance of safety again, how we can get more safety into us. What would you say, to the women? One really big response I got was that some women just feel completely shut down, like completely disassociated. They have zero libido, no drive at all, no desire at all. Do you feel like that is a trauma response? Does this go back to that feeling of safety? Or what would you say to that woman who's finding herself in that place?
Yeah, it absolutely can be a trauma response or a grief response, right? That could be
Mhm.
that despair.
Mhm.
If, again, with the particular what we're talking about, like it is often traumatic that, yes, a lot of time the body, the nerve, it collapses, right? Or it goes just kind of immobile. It shuts down. It's not a rest and digest of like, great. It's like hypoarousal.
Mhm.
Right. So for people who are feeling in that, now that might be like just in general, right? They're having like days and days and days and weeks at that, or they're noticing moments throughout the day where they dissociate. We would say, okay, this is maybe not a great time for just like a quiet meditation. Maybe you need to do some like tremor work or like shake it off work. Maybe we need some of that bilateral stimulation work, like something that's more kind of stimulating, right? Kind of an up regulator. If people are feeling super shut down, they may not do well with the like really quiet meditating or the
Reflective,
really
yeah.
quiet, like grounding techniques. They might have to do those embodiment practices that are getting safety by kind of waking it up safely and letting your body know like it's safe to be here and your mind know it's safe to be here. So it's okay if quiet meditations or body scans don't work for you. If you have to do humming exercises or right using your throat and making sounds, if you have to do kind of like a shaking exercise or tremor work, if you want to meditate, but you want to be walking, like these are all those small practices that we say, like to try to do even daily
Mhm.
that get your mind back into your body in a safe way.
Mhm.
Now, again, you do have to actually, there has to be outside safety, right? So that still means like your house and your home life does have to feel safe, and does your relationship feel safe and all these other things. It's not just on you, your responsibility to like cultivate safety inside of you if it doesn't exist,
Mhm.
right? But that is one way. Those are individual things you can do, right? To kind of wake the body up a little bit, connect in a safe way again for folks who might be feeling more of that like hypo arousal, the shutdown,
Mhm.
right? That I feel nothing.
Yeah, I know that's how I responded. It was very much like disassociate, numb, kinda not be here, right? For me, a big thing was running. I started running and I was
Mm.
like, "Okay, I feel like I'm kind of coming back to life." It was kinda like what you said, like, kinda like you need to, like, charge yourself up, right? Like,
Yes.
almost like I picture those, I forget what they're called, when you put on the chest and you, like,
Like a
shocks.
defibrillator? Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. You're like, "Charge."
It kinda was
Yes.
like that for me where I'm like, "Okay, I need to wake up and know that, like, my body is capable," and just kinda, like, jolt myself back into
Yes.
being in my body and being in kind of reality, you know?
Yes. And, like, those little things build on themselves, right? So even if it just starts by you shaking a knee and then
Mhm.
shaking your other knee or shaking your hands or
Mhm.
right, just something to say like, "Oh, right, I'm disconnected and I need my body
Needs
is
to come
gonna
here.
connect," but in, like, a very small, safe way, right?
Mhm.
We don't wanna judge the body, it's doing what it thinks it needs to do,
Mhm.
right? And it's probably learned that when you were a kid,
Totally.
right? So it's like, it has all these practices with this new intense stress and pain,
Mhm.
and it's going to use everything it has, and that might be a shutting down or hyperarousal, right? Which is more of like the panic and the all that.
Mhm.
Those we would say, hey, a therapist would probably recommend maybe some like down regulating activities, right?
Mhm.
Maybe more of the like, let's kind of like not relax, but because that's easier said than done. But yeah, it's like it could be small. If you don't have your shoes on running, like that's okay. Shake your legs,
Mhm.
right? Shake your hands, hum, sing something really loud. You'd
Mhm.
be surprised how that can, wake up the nervous, kind of respond for your nervous system. And you're not just trying to talk it all out. You're not trying to think your way out of it because
Mhm.
that just doesn't always work.
No, like, sometimes I was like, "I'm so sick of talking about this," like,
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
and, like, I just need to, like, get back into my body.
Yes,
I'm really glad
yes.
you used the term, like, alive, like feeling alive. So one thing I know that is like can be so impossibly difficult, and I'm sure this ties into everything that we've already spoken about. But how, as a woman, I said before, grief is inherently sexy. And as a grieving woman, because it is a lifelong thing, right? We are holding this forever. We are going to be hitting those milestones forever, reminders forever. We really are grieving an entire life. How do you even begin to start feeling sexy again? Because
Mm,
that's a part of it too, right? Is like not only the desire for your partner or the intimacy, but also just like yourself, being able to feel desirable, right?
yes,
So, what
yes.
can you say about that?
Yeah, if I'm trying to think of some things that might be like, okay, obviously this could also mean weeks and weeks of sex therapy,
Sure,
right? So
sure.
of course I won't boil it down to like some simple thing, but I think it's that what are we grieving in terms of our sexual identity, right? So with loss, right, you're grieving so many things. You're like, I'm grieving in motherhood. I'm
Mhm,
grieving in a career, right? I'm grieving as a friend, like all these
mhm,
things that I've lost. Why is sexuality not talked about, right?
mhm,
What changed? What are you missing? Like, what did sexy feel like before this,
mm.
right? And even you're probably going to challenge some things. Is sexy about being desired by a partner? Because that very thing could be the thing that shuts you down right now,
Totally.
right? So a lot of this is really exploring, like, if you had to explain yourself, like, sexually, like, what does that mean? Like, what is your sexuality? Just like when people ask, what's your spirituality? Right? What's your emotional state like? It's like, oh, sexuality is one of those layers. It's just as important, if not more, than spirituality, in my opinion. I'm biased because I'm a sex therapist and
Yeah.
not like a
Well,
spiritual therapist, right?
and
Yeah.
it probably has changed, right? Because like
And as
loss
it would,
changes it, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
it'll change lifelong, right? Sexuality changes lifelong, just like your cognitive state does, and your emotional state and your spiritual state. So, with or without this loss, this was already going to change. When's the last did we ever actually look and say, who am I as a sexual being? And if
Mhm.
not, this might be your first chance to do that,
Well,
right?
because the
This might
problem
be
is
an
probably
opportunity.
could be staring at you right in the face where you're like,
Yeah.
I guess I got to deal with this. Like, because,
Yes.
right?
Right? So it could be little things of, oh, I feel sexy because of how I look. That might mean doing hair, doing my makeup, right? It's something of, maybe feeling pretty. It could mean having sensual touch and massage with your partner can make you feel sexy again, right? And just even doing like sensual practices with a partner kind of depends how you answer, how's my sexuality? Does it feel really relational? Is it about how your partner wants you, how your partner sees you, or is it more of an individual thing for you about how you feel about yourself and if you like your hair done? Or is it about the clothes you're wearing? Comfort versus sexiness. We think those are opposing. Do they have to be? Things can be comfortable, comfy clothes, comfy hairstyles and stuff, and still be sexy. So
Good
you're going to be
point.
challenging some beauty standards. You're going to be challenging standards of society around what is sexy. Who decided that for you, right? As a
It's a
woman,
really
who
good
decided
point.
what sexy is, right?
That's a good place to start
So
because it's like,
yeah,
what do I even think sexiness is? I think, like I said, it could be staring at you right in the mirror, right? It could either, when you're looking at your postpartum body and you're judging the hell out of it, or you're, wanting to call in a baby, you somehow have to have, sex with your partner and you're just feeling so undesirable. Actually asking yourself that question, because I don't think it was something that I personally have ever had to ask myself before I got there. And I was like, oh, this is a big deal because this has totally shifted. And now this is really hard. And like, why is this hard? And like,
and
why
you
do I?
probably never looked at it before because everything
Exactly.
felt okay, right?
Hmm.
And that's what happens is we don't talk to people about, have you assessed any, have you talked to your partner, have you talked to yourself about your sexual wellness and checked in? Because even if it's not from loss, it's going to be from age. If it's not from age, it's going to be from medicine. Something is going to change
Hmm.
how you feel in terms of sexiness or how your desire is or your arousal, right? We know that it's ever changing. I'm like, it's very different from when you were a child and you do have sexuality. You're not supposed to be sexually active, right?
Hmm.
Because that's like children are not consenting, but children are sexual and they do have sexuality,
Hmm.
right? They might be more explorative, right? And it's more, but they have body's developing. They have hormones, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, they are not like sexual beings like that. We're not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be sexualizing them, which we see as a major issue right now and always, but we are definitely talking about it more. But they still have sexuality, right, from the moment of conception.
Mm-hmm.
So that is going to be very different than when you're 18, right? Which you might now be actually engaging in sexual play and sexual exploration. You might now be a sexual being. It's going to be different than when you're 30 and then when you're 50 and all these things of menopause and perimenopause. Now we're adding in loss, we're adding
Mm-hmm.
in trauma. And I'm like, this was already something we should have been taught as women to look at a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry that the mirror is like now in front of you at like the hardest time when this probably feels the least important.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sad because like we deserved a foundation long before this, and not to only just like talk about sexiness and sexual wellness when it's like the worst, hardest time in our
Like it,
lives.
it's, it feels like a mountain, right? You're like looking at the
Yes.
mountain and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. And I'm like, you start small because again, you've probably never done any of this, and it already was like a mountain, and now it's the tallest mountain in the world. And it's like we just start small. We just like questions like, what does it mean to be sexy? Does that is that dependent on how my body looks? Does that depend on body parts? Does that depend again on how my partner desires me? Because all of that will change. Whatever body parts you have, they will not look the same in 30 years. And your hormones will not look the same in 30 years. And the things you are physically able to do right now will not look the same in 50 years, but you will still have sexuality and still be sexual. So how are we adapting, right? What is the sexiness dependent on? Because you might think it's dependent on something. I'm like, well, that's not forever. So now what?
I think, as you're talking, I'm just thinking, man, Hollywood has really done us a huge disservice in this area.
Yes.
Cause I'm like, all of the themes that have probably come up that have made this part so much harder. Just like, what is a sexy woman? What is sexy? What is intimacy with your partner? What is sex even all about? And when we're going by like Hollywood's, I'm just going to use Hollywood as an example, by going by those standards, it makes it feel like so much scarier, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I
Yeah.
mean, people are walking into sex therapy without loss, right? People are walking in with, as pretty well adjusted, there's not many major events, but if they are walking in and they were raised as a woman, I'm like, we already have more compounding things that you might, like they might not be big T,
Mhm.
but you have been taught to like not be in your body. You have been taught to look away, to perform, right? This is not just like a sexual trauma issue or only a loss issue. This is just an issue with the fact that like you've never actually been safely called into your own body.
Mhm.
That was trained out of you a long time ago, right? So now you're taking on patriarchy and
I was just going to
all
say,
these things. It's
there's this other small major piece to this too, is the fact that, we have the president that we do, and there's all
yeah,
these things that make women feel inherently
yes,
small or, yeah.
yes. And if it feels so big where you're like, oh, I'm gonna push this away because this is a lot. It is a lot. You're not hearing that wrong. Like again, I sit with people for months unpacking childhood messages and patriarchy and messages around sexiness and what makes us sexy and what are we allowed and all of these things, right? But to remember too, this is also something you get to co-create with your partner. You get to make sex, sexuality, sexual wellness, sensuality, closeness look like whatever the two of you want, and no one else gets to dictate that. So that's why I'm like the talking with your partner, because you don't have to take this on alone. You get to say to your partner, like, oh my gosh, I thought being sexy meant thin or boobs or tight skin or whatever they've, all this stuff. And you get to say, and you get to hear them say, oh gosh, I don't care about any of that, right?
Mhm.
And you get to like co-create this sense of safety and security and sensuality and closeness, and you get to trust them.
Mhm.
Because right now, all you think, like, it's not about what your partner says they like, or it's not about anything your partner said. It's about what someone said when you were 15, or it's about what the
Totally.
movie said, or,
And like, how do you
right?
know what your partner might like you best in your sweatpants with your mom bun? And, that
Yes.
might be sexy to them. And how are you going to know that unless you have that conversation,
Right.
right?
And is it safe to be sexy? So then now you're in the other part of, I'm actually afraid to tap into my sexy because what if my partner wants to it makes them, right, make advances, or that might initiate sensuality or things. And now we're back in that like geared up, out of my body. I'm going to have to perform it. I'm like, that's why we talk about it. That's part of safety is like, are we allowed to have a sense of sexiness without that meaning it leads to sex? Because we want to slow things down and we want to feel close and we want to feel sensual. And that's just not how it works for a lot of people.
Mhm.
Right. So can we also tap into sexiness without it meaning we are having sex or have to be like sexually active in some way? So it's a lot.
It's a
It's a
lot.
lot. And
It's a
then on
lot.
top, right? Yeah, it's so much. And then to just when you pull back in like the grief piece or the, your body, the not feeling safe in your own body, like it really is specific and no one is talking about it.
Mhm.
I've
Like
done grief
literally no one.
trainings
Like
and it was not in there.
yeah.
Like it's not.
There's in the 5 years that I have been, well, I've been a lost mom for 13 years, but the 5 years since my daughter passed, I have not had really any conversations around sex at all. And like, I've been pregnant 3 times. So it's just like very interesting to think back. And, this is a huge piece of it. And, in my communities, we talk about all the time, like that feeling of safety and how important it is and how important that is to even call in a baby, to like signal to your body that I'm safe here. You're safe to come to me and safe to have my baby. And it could be just so hard when that is such a struggle, right? And the struggle makes total and complete sense, but it's a lot, right?
And if no one's talking about it, it makes it that much harder.
Yeah,
Like,
because you're just isolated. Like I know
yeah.
that I did have sexual issues before loss, and like that made things even more complex. But you can really feel alone in that when people aren't talking about it. Like, am I the only one struggling, not
Or am I
wanting?
wrong for caring about this? Am I wrong for even wanting to address sex,
Totally.
right? Like, because it's so backburnered as this thing, like, you shouldn't even be thinking about that.
Mhm.
You should be thinking about your relationship with God. You should be thinking about your emotions. You should be thinking about all these other things. Why are you thinking about sex? And I'm like, because it's a human right.
Yeah. Well, you're
And it is
sad.
just as
Why are you
important.
thinking about sex? Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, oh, because it's natural and we deserve it. And we're allowed to, like, we should at least be talking about it. Even if you don't want to be having it, it still deserves attention.
I'm gonna ask you a question that's kind of a zinger
Okay.
as a marriage therapist.
Yeah.
What if you are in a relationship and you're realizing that you don't feel safe? We're having this conversation
Mm.
and women are thinking about having this talk with their partner, facing intimacy with their partner, realizing that they don't feel safe having this conversation. And it's not just because of what's happened, but maybe they feel unsafe in their relationship. What would you say
Yes.
to that?
So safety meaning so my background was obviously in domestic violence and sexual trauma before I started moving into this, the like, attaching, moving from trauma to pleasure and embodiment and all of that. But before that, it was very much around like unsafe relationships. So I think there's a difference between I feel unsafe
Hmm.
and like I know I am safe, but my body, my nervous system doesn't know it,
Hmm.
versus my nervous system is absolutely telling me like this is unsafe, whether that
Hmm.
mean emotionally or physically.
Hmm.
Right. So my number one thing is like, please talk to somebody if you're trying to like decipher that. Of course, if it's safe, but please connect with somebody if you are struggling to decipher, like, am I actually unsafe?
Hmm.
Right. Is there something my partner is doing? Right. That's just like, oh, they're struggling to communicate. They're struggling to empathize. They don't quite understand is very different than someone using like a tactic of power and control.
Totally.
Right. And making you feel unsafe. And sometimes that is hard to figure out.
Hmm.
So I would say, like, individually, seek some support for that. If you do find that you're feeling unsafe, but you do know your partner is a safe person and you're just trying to like, they're trying to learn how to be more supportive and they're struggling and they don't have those skills, that
Hmm.
is when I often refer to like couples therapy.
Hmm.
And I say, if you can do some relational work where someone can guide you both and it's not all on you to teach them,
Hmm.
but someone can help facilitate that, that's wonderful. If you are not safe and there is someone who is using power and control tactics, belittling you, manipulating you, you do not feel like you have full power in a relationship, I would say individual support, but I would never recommend conjoint work for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. That's good
I
to
hope
know.
that
And
answers in a direct yes.
it does. And
Yes.
I think it's a really important part of a piece of this puzzle, right? Because there might be that woman that's listening to this that, might need that support.
Yes. Yes.
All right. My final question. What would you want the woman listening, the one who is feeling swallowed up by her grief and disconnected in her body? What's one thing you would want her to know?
Mm, gosh, that you're not wrong. Your body was made to do this. It's not about making the grief go away. I think it's about finding the connection, keeping your baby a part of your everyday, right? That is the only thing I think that like reconciles the grief,
Mm-hmm.
is less about trying to make the grief going away, more about making sure you have these continued bonds and you have these ways to stay connected to your baby that you've lost, your baby that you've yet to meet, whoever, how many losses, right? All these things. It is not about making the grief shrink. That part is completely normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's how do we move from them being something that was supposed to be in someone that was supposed to be a physical presence to making them into a person of memory. And that was not my own. That's in, that's in grief work. That is like part of grief practices, moving them from a person of presence in a physical sense to a person of memory. And that is where I think the energy needs to go. Not shrinking the grief, not making it go away, but bringing your baby in to your life and making sure that continues and memorializing them and finding your rituals. The grief is the normal, that's the natural part. It's the trying to shut this other part down. That's not what we were made to do.
Integration, right? We love it. Well, Sarah, I think this is a great place to close things off. I'm so, I could sit here and talk to you all day because I've a million other things I would love to learn, but I'm just so appreciative of you sharing your wisdom and your story and being this voice in this topic that nobody talks about. And I'm hoping the women listening are writing down their notes and
Yeah.
that this meets them in a place that they really needed it. I just want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you to everyone listening. And yeah, just if you're taking notes and if you're struggling and you're like, oh, this feels big, like there are professionals out there. There are sex therapists. They are regular therapists. They just have more credential added on, right? But this is accessible if you have insurance. These are things that are attainable. And if not, just surrounding yourself by sex positive professionals. If you are on social media, surrounding yourself with people who are sex positive or people who are in this field. And just letting this become a normal thing so it doesn't feel so one-off. It shouldn't feel so special, even though I'm glad it does today. But just kind of surrounding yourself, like this doesn't need to be this like hidden thing, right? So thank you so much for having me and for everyone listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to connect more, Instagram is where I hang out most, so come join me in a beautiful community of lost moms for pregnancy after loss education, real-life grief talk, and deep solidarity. You can find me at the.doula.life and at the Rainbow Connection Podcast. And remember, you are never alone. I'll see you in the next episode.